Hey guys, welcome to LSPTV. In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing project launches, pink sales, whitelists, that sort of thing. And I'm going to be going through some examples. I want to show you, I want to kind of focus on the first initial launch, when a project goes live and people just, really go for it. And we get these insane candles and what feels like a pump and dump at the time. And I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what I like to do. In the hopes that what I say and go through, is going to help you guys avoid getting stuck in some of these situations. So before I get into any of this, I'm going to be showing you guys a bunch of charts. Many of you may look at these charts and think, I kind of know that one. This is in no way a discussion on any of these projects. Okay, my intention is to show the emotion that happens and how to avoid some of these unfortunate circumstances that happen when people get into new and fresh projects. And the projects themselves have absolutely no control over this. It's actually the people that are to blame for this. Frantically try to buy to get the most out of their position, the most out of their money, or the most tokens for their money, and invariably push price up. And then those who got in early, they will just take profits. And this is why we see these insane movements. But again, this in no way reflects on the projects or the tokens themselves. I'm not here to say what's a good project and what's a bad project. In today's episode, my intention is to focus solely on what we're discussing. And in the last portion of the video, I'm going to show you guys a slide, and I'm going to kind of give you guys some ideas, which I'm hoping are going to help, with future launches and future pre-sales and that sort of thing. So with that said, let's get into the first chart. And I'm going to be going through these quite quickly. I don't want the the episode to be quite exhaustive. But when we look at a chart like this, and when I saved all of these, just for transparency's sake, I literally I was typing in a bunch of letters and whatnot. There's a few that I know of, obviously, that I've been involved in, but there was a few that I had no idea that they even existed, and I just clicked on the chart and I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. So I took a snapshot, and you're going to see a lot of different variations. So this, for me, okay, at the time I want to focus on the first sort of 10 candles. All right, the rest of it afterwards, it doesn't really bother me, but I want to focus on the first sort of 10 candles. That's where most of the problem happens. When a project goes live, so it hits the market and people have the opportunity to engage with that project. Okay, they frantically get on Pancake Swap or whatever wallet that they're using, decentralized wallet, and they will connect to Pancake Swap, and then they've got their BNB ready. And there's the first problem straight away. Okay, if you are going to try to buy straight away, make sure you are set up, make sure you are ready, make sure you're connected, make sure you have your BNB ready. Try to put yourself in the best possible position before you start, because if a project launches and then you are frantically trying to move things around, transfer BNB, these are all things that can be avoided. But if you're doing all of that to start with, you're already behind, already straight away. Okay, that's the first thing. But the first 10 candles, you can see price goes up. It's quite healthy. It's not insane. It pulls back a little bit, starts to grind up again, goes sideways. But we're not getting that insanity. We're not getting that insane move to the upside and then that instant reversal. This is the last slide that I wanted to show you, but I'm going to show you now. This big, strong green up candle followed by a very aggressive down candle. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it can show up in the second example where you see this big, strong green candle, and then it retraces and you get this horrible tail or wick behind, followed by some more downside, and then in the last example, maybe, when it's just launched, you see this, this big, strong move to the upside, followed by a complete reversal. And price is pretty much sitting, where it started. Okay. So going back to our first example, we're not seeing this. We're not seeing this in this project. Yeah, we're seeing a nice healthy movement, some grinding to the side, and then we get this sort of continuation to the upside a little later. We'll go to our second example. Again, we see this nice strong move to the upside, and then we see this kind of grinding to the side, and then slowly starting to make its way back up again. Again, this type of movement, in the first example and the second example, is akin to a project that has taken precautionary measures and put things in place to make sure that they are eliminating as much as possible people dumping on a project, okay? Because unfortunately, we're dealing with people's emotions, we're dealing with human behavior, and ultimately, as many people have quite rightly said, if you are lucky enough to get into a project early, and I'm not talking about pre-sale or whitelist, I'm just talking about on launch. So when a project launches, you get in, you get a good amount of tokens, and then it really starts to go because people are pushing price up, buys. If you get in for, say $500, and then you're currently sitting on maybe 10 or 15, 20 minutes later, a couple of thousand, 3,000, 4,000, whatever the case may be, it's going to be very difficult to not take that. Ultimately, you would have to really believe in the project and understand the mechanics of what's going on in that moment to just say, look, I'm going to buy this and I'm just going to kind of forget about it for the next couple of months until it settles, and then I'll look to maybe add to my position, right? So let's go to our third example. And again, we can see this for me is probably one of the healthiest, where you get this nice steady launch, and then it starts to grind. There's no erratic behavior, there's no insanity, there's no craziness going on. It's just a nice gradual move to the upside, not dissimilar to what you can sometimes get when some companies go public on the stock exchange, for example. I know we get some craziness in, I've seen some insane public, companies going public on the stock exchange. But again, you also get to see something like this where it's nice, it's progressive, it's calm and controlled. Again, we are not seeing so far any of this, okay? We're just seeing nice, steady, controlled movement. We have seen a couple of examples like the first one and the second one where you get the first initial, impulse, but then again, after the fact, there's no dumping, there's no craziness. And again, I want to really emphasize this is primarily due to the projects themselves putting safeguards in place to make sure that this does not happen. Okay, this is very, very important. Part of the reason, or part of the process that I use when I'm vetting projects is this: how well can they, mitigate this problem? Yeah. Because it happens. Unfortunately, it just happens, right? So let's go to our fifth example, or fifth example. And you can see in this particular case, we get this explosive move to the upside, and then we get this nasty drop. So anybody that got in at launch took their profit at the top, and then you get this aggressive move to the downside, and then price just kind of starts to stabilize. And eventually, when you get situations like this, people who buy, and I'm going to kind of throw in some things here. When people buy launches like this, okay, you get this move to the upside and so on. There are those who sit back and say, look, I know this is going to happen. Yeah, they're experienced. They've maybe seen quite a few launches before. Even if they've not participated in those launches, it doesn't matter. They've seen this type of price behavior before. They know it happens. Human nature is human nature, right? So they take a step back and they're like, why would I bother trying to get in on launch, when it could potentially, when we could potentially get something like this, when I can just take a step back, let price pull back, let price settle, even if it takes 2 or 3 days, then I can start to assess, and then I can, potentially purchase, and slowly start to increase my bag that way. You will find mathematically over time, you will get a much better, average cost doing it this way, and being patient and waiting, than you would trying to frantically get in at launch. We know obviously that when we're buying at launch, there are sometimes situations, where you get absolutely destroyed on slippage, you get destroyed, on the amount of tokens that you get for the amount of BNB that you put in, or the, whatever, currency you're using at the time. So ultimately, this is about patience. This is about taking a step back. This is about understanding we're trying to put ourselves on the best side of an investment that we are looking to hold for a longer period of time. Now, I know there's people out there, who are looking to get into pre-launches or pre-sales or launches, because they're trying to, take advantage of that first initial, explosion to the upside, grab some money and then kind of move on to the next project, right? And this is a valid strategy. This is something that is used. I personally try to avoid situations like this. I don't really like getting into these types of, trades, because they're very volatile. They're very dangerous. You can end up on the wrong side of something, and sometimes you can end up, purchasing at a much higher price than you're expecting. So you know execute your order, it says it's gone through, you're kind of waiting 10, 15, 20 minutes, finally your order gets executed, and you just get a price that is like so insane and so far outside of what you were expecting. You have to end up basically holding and holding and holding and praying that price goes back to at least break even, so you can then again exit your position. And I will just quickly say as well, remember, most of these projects that we're discussing, as you guys know, we talk about reflection tokens quite a lot, are taxed. So you have to take this into consideration as well. All right. So let's continue. Again, here's another example of a healthy launch price, launches, it goes up. Now, I will just quickly say as well that some of these, because of the time, that some of these projects have been around, I've had to either use a 4-hour chart, an hourly chart, or a 15-minute chart. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember which is which at this point, because I just wanted to put this together and then just kind of put the slides, into the software so I can show you, what's going on type of thing. But I want to really emphasize that at the time. So in this example, we would only have seen that first initial candle. So on launch, that candle starts and it goes up, and it very, very well looks like, or can look like, one of these examples, the last two examples, the one in the middle and the one on the far right. Okay. But again, when you're going through this process and actually watching something like this unfold, you kind of feel it, you can see price behaving, you can see it really exploding, you can see the FOMO, the people really pushing to, to try frantically to get into, whatever project it is. And it's not always, even if we were looking at that candle in that moment, it doesn't always feel like it's going to be it's going to end up being a pump and dump. Sometimes you can sense it coming. You're like, yeah, this is moving way too fast. This is insane. I'm just going to avoid this because I can see it crashing at some point, So again, just bear that in mind. We would have been watching this at the time, when it was first initial. It's nice to look at it afterwards and say, well, this looks, kind of healthy. But we've got to be realistic as well and say that we would have been looking at that candle in that moment, and it very well could have looked like, the last two examples here. All right. So let's go to our another example. You can see again an explosive move to the upside, and then obviously we get this nasty drop and then sideways, reaction. And again, when you look at this, example, wouldn't it be better to allow price to just do its thing? Because this is all about psychology. This has absolutely nothing to do with the project. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. It's about you and your own personal psychology. Okay, people are scared and they jump into a project because they FOMO in. They FOMO in so much, the fear of missing out. I'm going to miss this, and I desperately want to use, whatever BNB that I've got to accumulate as much as I possibly can, so I'm one of the top holders. And I would say probably 60 to 70%, maybe 80% of the time, that's not how it works out. You end up getting absolutely destroyed. Whether it's through slippage, whether it's through price not executing, whether it's price moving too fast, whether it's an illiquid market, whether things aren't set up correctly, whether the project itself hasn't put things in place to avoid things like this, and so on. And then ultimately you end up with a horrible, nasty situation where you're pretty much in 3/4 of the way up, or maybe at the top. And then you have to sit, for months and months and months while you wait for everything else, to kind of come to fruition, and price starts to slowly, grind to the upside again. So again, when we're looking at this example, we can see that it is indeed like our last slide here. So let's go over to another example. Again, we can see price starts, nice grind up to the upside. We do get a bit of a nasty drop after the fact, but ultimately the first initial moment of launch, that's what I want to focus on. This is where we're really trying to emphasize. That's where most of the craziness happens. The first initial launch. This is about patience. This is about taking your time, allowing things to unfold. And I will take a step back for a second and I'll just say something. Somebody may say to me, but wait a second, don't we need people to be engaging with these projects? Because if they don't, then we may very well not get this pullback that you're talking about. So if we just quickly go back to the last slide for a second, let's take the middle example. If people are not buying, and price goes up and then down to create this problem. So buying, price goes up, and then a bunch of sellers, who got in very, very early, create this horrible, nasty wick, and then we can step in and say, okay, look, I'm going to let price settle, maybe potentially buy some now. If none of that happens, then maybe we don't get this movement in the first place, right? To then look at it afterwards and say, okay, now I'm thinking about potentially buying. Trust me when I tell you it's going to happen, okay? Human behavior is human behavior, okay? I know that what I'm saying right now is not going to be not necessarily accepted, but I know most people aren't going to listen to, what I'm saying, because the impulse to get into something, I've experienced this. I've experienced FOMO so many times. I'm buying it because there's no way that I'm missing out type of mentality. I've been there so many times. Trust me. Most of you that are listening to me may think, do you know what? It makes perfect sense what he's saying. I've heard, other people talking about this before. I've even heard the projects themselves say, take a step back, relax, let things unfold. And yet the impulse gets the better of us and boom, we're in, right? So just bear that in mind, right? So in this example, like I said, this is a nice, healthy, this is a nice, healthy launch. And for me, again, there's also the flip side that you can, maybe see price going up, in a nice steady fashion. And you think, you know what, I'm actually going to buy some, but scale your orders. Why do you have to buy it all in one go? Why do you have to bet the farm? Why do you have to put it all in? Because I'm telling you, like I said, if you take a step back and you look at the math, 3 to 4 months later, you can look back and say, wow, if I'd have just done nothing and actually bought now, instead of then, I would have more tokens. I'd be in a much better position. I would have a much better average cost, and I would be able to see how far, into the roadmap the project is. Are they fulfilling on their objectives? And this is part of the reason that when I'm vetting projects, I wait for launch. I'm actually in the process right now of vetting some projects, and I've told the projects themselves, I'm going to wait for you guys to launch, because for me, I would rather see you launch, have a successful launch, start to see how you are, going down the road of updating your community, doing your roadmap. Are you on point, and so on and so on and so on? Because then I can, look maybe a month later or a couple of weeks or 3 weeks later after launch and say, you know what? I like this project. It's in a much stronger position right now. I can see, price is healthy. I can see the way things have been moving around, and now I'm more inclined to maybe look a little bit deeper, and talk to the founders again and go through the whole process. So patience is absolutely key. And then in our last example, we can see again price, and this one is closely related to the first example that we can see here, where you can see this nice move up to the upside, and then eventually we get this, this drop to the downside. But it's more drawn out over a slightly longer period of time. But ultimately, the same thing, still occurs. And what's interesting about this example, and I'll say this now before I continue, you see the first 2 candles, and then you see this, slow sort of sideways grind, and then you see that price starts to accelerate. Make note of this. Make note of the first initial 10 candles or so, where you can see price slowly starts, grind sideways, and then slowly starts to accelerate. This is actually quite healthy. Okay, this is not as bad as it looks. And the reason I wanted to put this example in here is because of that fact. When you're watching it happen live, if you are able to take your emotions out of the equation, just look at price objectively, because remember, people say charts this and charts that, and they're a waste of time. Actually, in this instance, charting is probably the most essential skill to have when you're watching a pre-launch. Okay, not a pre-launch, sorry, but when you're watching a launch. So when it launches, the only way that we can determine what price is doing visually is by looking at a chart. Yeah. So when we see price behaving this way, it's showing us that it's not frantically being bought. It's not an insane move like this, where you see the first initial euphoria where people are going crazy and just, we've got to buy it, explosion to the upside, and then this horrible, nasty drop as people start to sell to take profits. This is actually quite healthy. So the after effect is, and what I'm really trying to emphasize in this video, take a step back, let things unfold, be patient, don't FOMO in, because it's the worst thing you can do. And eventually, like I said, you will, trust me when I tell you, trust me, people will sell. There are people who will take profits and price will react to that. If we go through each of the examples, we can see, and every example that I'm showing you right now, has ultimately come back to a point where you would have got a better price. If you factor in the slippage, the craziness that happens during launches, the inability to be able to buy sometimes even missing completely, and so on, you would eventually end up in a situation, where your price or entry price is actually 50 to 60 to 70% better than it ever would have been if you'd have just tried to buy it, during the launch. And all of these examples do the same thing, in terms of the end result. Patience. If you're patient, you will get what you're looking for. All right. So I'm really hoping that during all of this video and some of the the talks that I've kind of gone through, I've really emphasized this patience. Try not to FOMO into these projects. Be cautious. Me personally, what I like to do is I take a step back. Sorry guys, I'm in no rush. I'm in zero rush to get into a project. Unfortunately, and this is down to the projects themselves and the way that they promote themselves. Unfortunately, we are in a space where the projects are promoted in a way that if you don't get as much as you can, you're going to miss out. And I think it's a shame that it's that way, because ultimately, if a project presented itself in a much healthier way, people would buy more healthily. The chart would be healthier. The project itself would have a more fluid increase, of price, market cap. There'd be, a nice flow of money coming in and out, so it's more fluid. The project itself would just be better and better as it goes, and as it continues to grow throughout this time. So because they promote this kind of, you've got to get it, this hype, this is part of the problem why we see these insane movements, right? And then people like myself and some other fantastic content creators out there and educators, and even the projects themselves, like I said, they step in and they say, look, guys, we've seen some craziness happen recently. Just be careful. We see in the past as well, you can go through a lot of these charts. It's all there. All the data's there. You can see that there's a lot of this kind of pump dump type of behavior on the charts. And again, it doesn't reflect on the project itself. It's not saying, or I'm not saying, that any project out there, where you see this behavior happen on the charts is a scam or it's a rug pull or anything like that. But ultimately, we all try to step in and say, look, guys, just be patient. Just let things unfold. Let price do its thing. And ultimately, if you're patient and you wait and you really take your time, you will find yourself in a much better, situation later on down the line, with a much healthier bag size, much healthier average cost, in a project that is, in the position to be able to move forward, in a much better way. All right. And ultimately, as my logo says, it's the trader, it's nothing else. That's period. It's the trader, nothing else. You are responsible for everything that happens in your trading, your investing, or anything to do, with the crypto space. When you're engaging with this market, you are the one that is solely responsible for anything that happens to you in this market. If you cannot control your FOMO, if you can't control your emotions and you feel the need to want to get in right now, I've got to do it, and something goes wrong, that's on you, because you can't control your emotions, So I'm hoping, like I said, that these, this chat, this talk, going through these examples is, is giving you something to think about. And my intention, obviously, is to try and keep people safe from this, getting in and just, having to sit through this horrible, you get in, you've bought near the high, or you've got battered, on slippage or something like that, and then ultimately you see it drop and you're sitting on a loss. It's unfortunate. So with that said, I hope everyone's having an absolutely fantastic day, and I will look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. All the best and take care.